안녕하세요. 곧 행사가 시작됩니다. 네, 오베라는 남자의 저자 프레드릭 바크만 작가와의 대담에 참석해주신 여러분께 환영과 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 저는 오늘 사회를 맡은 연세대학교 영어영문학과 교수 전보미입니다. 반갑습니다. 청중 여러분께서는 원활한 진행을 위해서 핸드폰은 진동 모드로 바꿔주시고 행사 도중 플래시를 터뜨리는 행위는 삼가주시기를 부탁드립니다. 우선 내빈 소개를 드리겠습니다. 연세대학교 문과대학 김한샘 기획부학자님 오셨습니다. 연세대학교 서홍원 영어영문학 연구소장님 오셨습니다. 오늘 통역에는 권세라 통역사님께서 수고해 주시겠습니다. 네. 그럼 첫 순서로 연세대학교 김한샘 기획부학장님을 모시고 환영사를 청해 듣도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 연세대학교 문과대학 기획부학장 김한샘입니다. 연세대학교 문과대학 인문예술진흥사업단과 한국문학번역원이 공동 주최하는 프레드릭 베크만 작가와의 대담에 참석해 주신 여러분께 진심으로 감사드리고 환영합니다. 연세대학교 인문예술진흥사업단의 연세인문 특강 시리즈의 일환이자 서울국제작가축제의 협력 프로그램의 일환으로서 스웨덴의 프레드릭 베크만 작가님을 모시고 문학과 인생에 관한 흥미로운 이야기를 청해 들을 수 있는 기회를 마련했습니다. 베크만 작가님은 전 세계 46개국에 번역 출판되어 800만 부가 판매된 베스트셀러 소설 오베라는 남자로 잘 알려져 있으시고 이후로도 불안한 사람들, 베어타운, 우리와 당신들, 위너 등의 훌륭한 소설들을 계속 써내며 왕성하게 활동하고 계신 세계적인 소설가이십니다. 흔쾌히 초대에 응해주신 베크만 작가님께 감사의 말씀을 드리고 작가님과의 대담을 진행해 주실 윤혜준 연세대 영문과 교수님께도 감사드립니다. 아울러 한국문학번역원의 여러 관계자 선생님들께도 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 오늘날 우리는 사람들 간의 무관심 혹은 적대와 분열이 점점 커져만 가는 상황을 목격하고 있습니다. 그렇기에 어딘가 모르게 고독한 우리 사람들의 이야기를 통해 더불어 산다는 것에 관해 생각하게 하는 소설들을 써오신 베크만 작가님께서 오늘 우리에게 들려주실 말씀들이 더욱 귀중하게 다가올 것으로 생각됩니다. 아마 작가님의 소설들처럼 위트가 넘치는 가운데에도 인간을 향한 애정이 따뜻하게 배어나오는 대담이 되리라 예상해 봅니다. 이 자리에 오신 여러분들 중에는 베크만 작가님의 탁월한 글쓰기의 비밀을 엿보고 싶어서 오신 분도 계실 것이고 재치 있는 입담을 기대하고 오신 분도 계실 겁니다. 여러분들이 찾는 것이 무엇이든 그것을 오늘 강연 속에서 얻어가시기를 즐겁고 뜻깊은 시간 보내시기를 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 그럼 이어서 연세대학교 서홍원 영어영문학 연구소장님 모시고 축사를 전해 듣도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주십시오.
안녕하세요. 연세대학교의 서홍원입니다. 환영사는 영어로 하겠습니다. Welcome, Mr. Backman. It is my great pleasure to welcome best-selling novelist Fredrik Backman to Yonsei University. As many of our attendants here already know, his novels have touched millions around the world with their unique blend of humor and pathos. His oddball characters have been sculpted with loving care as they face or create their own adversities and turn them into mini triumphs. Mr. Backman's novels address societal issues such as mental health, aging, and the pressures of modern life, all without losing hope. As such, they will resonate with Koreans, young and old, who face similar problems that seem only to worsen as time progresses. How can we get through this and still retain a core of our humanity? Maybe the question that Mr. Backman may be able to provide an answer to. We are eager to hear more about his creative process and the inspiration behind his works. Thank you, Fredrik Backman, for joining us today. We hope this conversation will be lively and heartwarming for all of us. Thank you.
이제 이어서 베크만 작가님을 모시고 대담 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 모두 잘 아시겠지만 베크만 작가님은 오베라는 남자, 불안한 사람들, 베어타운, 우리와 당신들, 위너 등 비평가들의 호평을 받은 여러 소설로 뉴욕타임즈 베스트셀러 1위에 올랐고 이 중 오베라는 남자는 영화화되어 전 세계에서 많은 사랑을 받았습니다. 오늘 대담은 윤혜준 교수님께서 수고해 주시겠습니다. 윤혜준 교수님은 연세대 영어 영문학과 소속으로 영어 비교문학과 영국 및 대륙 소설 등을 연구하고 계십니다. 저서로는 2017년에 해외에서 출간한 The Rhetorics of Tenses in Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations 등이 있습니다. 그럼 베크만 작가님과 윤혜준 교수님 두 분 단상으로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주십시오.
A warm welcome to Yonsei University, Mr. Backman or Fredrik, which way. I should say, first of all, that I'm truly delighted that people still read novels in this day and age. And moreover, they read novels which are full of sound common sense rather than some weird, bizarre stuff, such as fantasy, sci-fi, experiments, and all of that. And moreover, that your novel features a man rather than a human, because the word man has somehow become rather a proscribed or a bad word. And moreover, your character is a white man, and that perhaps would become doubly a potentially a criminal potential for some people and so on, because a white man could be very easily targeted as someone to be earmarked to be cancelled by gender, race sensitivities and so forth. And moreover, your white man is an angry aging man. So that in itself becomes quite the most interesting, and I should say a courageous and bold choice in your pursuits. So I first of all should say, I wish to congratulate you on your success and also on your courage, on your artistic integrity and so forth, which certainly would not have been very easy or possible given all this current fads and current malaises and so on. 죄송합니다. So, there are a number of questions which I have prepared, and the audience has the transcripts of it. So, I should begin by the first question, which is also what many of your fans in here would also want to know. So, what made you write novels in the first place?
네, 일단 첫 번째 질문으로 들어가겠습니다. 어떻게 작가가 되기를 그 꿈을 꾸셨는지, 그리고 프로 소설가가 되기를 항상 꿈꾸셨는지 여쭤보겠습니다.
First of all, if I may, I have to say that I don't completely agree with your assessment of the way I write. I think I write about a lot of different people who look different and who are of different genders and come from different cultures, and I hope that I try to describe the world that I grew up in, and I think it's been a blessing for me that I always had people around me when I grew up who came from different countries, different cultures. I've always had people around me from different backgrounds who had different political views, who had different histories. And I do think that A Man Called Ove that you speak of is, to me, it's a story of understanding that people are different and understanding that not everyone looks the same or talk the same or have the same political views or the same stories, but it is, for me, a story of coming together. And regarding the question how I became a writer, I don't know how I became a writer. It was never my intention to be an author. I still don't think I am an author. I'm still waiting for people to find out that I don't know what I'm doing. People always ask me, how do you go about, how do you write a novel? I've been asked to teach at places like this, and I think that would be a horrible choice by any university to have me as a writings teacher. I have no idea how to write a novel. I don't. Every time that I write a novel, I am convinced that this is my last. This is the time that they figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't think there is one way to do it. I don't think there are rules. I don't think, so I never aspired to be an author. I like telling stories. It's the only thing I like. When I was a lonely child. I didn't have a lot of friends. And if you don't have friends growing up, then you realize that if you have books and movies and TV shows, you can escape. It's a vehicle to escape loneliness. If you have a book, then you're never alone. And it saved my life as a kid. And so the only thing that I wanted to do when I grew up was I like telling stories. I enjoy it. If it wouldn't have been books, then I think I would have tried to find another way to be able to tell stories. If I was a child now, maybe I would dream of having a podcast. I don't know. Maybe I would dream of being a YouTuber, like children. I don't know, but I like telling stories. It's the only thing that I enjoy doing. So I tried to tell stories, and I became an author by accident. It was never my intention.
네, 제가 백인 남성에 대해서 이제 소설을 쓴다고 교수님께서 평가를 해주시긴 했습니다만, 저는 문화나 성별 그리고 여러 배경에서 온 사람들에게 항상 영감을 받고 그에 대한 이야기들을 많이 쓰고 있습니다. 그래서 항상 화합의 이야기의 메시지를 담고자 노력을 하고 있습니다. 첫 번째 질문에 대한 답변을 드리자면, 작가가 어떻게 되었는가? 저도 잘 모릅니다. 의도가 전혀 없었고요. 항상도 지금도 들킬 거라고 예상을 하고 있습니다. 소설을 어떻게 쓰는가라는 질문을 제가 이렇게 북투어를 다니다 보면 많이 물어보시는데요. 아마 제가 강단을 서게 된다면 최악의 교수가 될 거라고 생각을 합니다. 어렸을 때부터 친구가 별로 없었고 책, 영화, TV가 저의 외로움에 대한 탈출구로서 저의 삶을 구원했기 때문에 어떻게 보면 스토리텔러가 된 것은 자연스러웠던 것이고요. 제가 요즘에 아마 태어났으면 팟캐스터, 유튜버가 되지 않았을까 예상합니다.
Well, thank you very much for your question and for the correction, which I humbly accept. Unlike you, I have made a trade of teaching students about novels and all these things and so on. So we have to make sense out of perhaps a difficult and ambiguous, slippery text. So obviously, this is a kind of question which we all have to ask and address and write about as students. So did any classical novelist ever influence you at all when you were sort of embarking on your career as a novelist? Any great novels of the past generations which you respect at least and so on, perhaps?
영감을 줬던 고전 소설가들이 혹시 있습니까?
I feel bad because my answers are very long and you have to translate them. I'm sorry. It's yes, many classical novelists, obviously. I think the way that I write, I think maybe you can trace back to the fact that I come from Scandinavia, obviously. I think the Scandinavian way of telling stories is, we have a lot of fairy tales. So I think you can see in the way that I write that I like fairy tales. My biggest hero is Astrid Lindgren, who wrote Pippi Longstocking, might be the most famous one in abroad. She wrote children's books, and I'm incredibly influenced by fairy tales. I think you can see in the way A Man Called Ove is a fairy tale. If you look at it, it's the hero's journey. It's the same as Star Wars and Harry Potter, and it's built the same way. You have the call to adventure. It begins with the call to adventure, where for Luke Skywalker, that's seeing the hologram, and for Harry Potter, it's the owl. But for Uwe, it's the neighbor backing his car into his mailbox. That's the call to adventure. And then it's built like an adventure. It's built like a fairy tale, exactly the same way, with the same ingredients. I just put it in a very small world. Instead of having it in outer space, it's a very small universe. But it's the same structure that I use. So I use the structure of my childhood reading fairy tales. So I think that's one influence. I think I've been very influenced by the American way of telling grand stories. Like in American literature, there's always a lot at stake. It's always life and death. It's always dramatic. It's always, the stakes are always huge. It's always, the big emotions. And I was being very influenced by that. And the third thing is that I was very, very influenced by British humor. I was incredible. I think reading Douglas Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is one of the most important things that has happened to me in my life. I think I was 9 or 10 years old. And I had read, I've read all the great, in Sweden we have the great novelists, August Strindberg, Selma Lagerlöf, Vilhelm Moberg, and when I was older, I read the American Hemingway, Faulkner. I've also been incredibly inspired by Margaret Atwood, Joyce Carol Oates. Had an immense impact on me, but I think no one had the impact that Douglas Adams had on me when he wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I read it 9, 10 years old. And I started reading it, and I thought, this is a man who's out of his mind. I couldn't believe that you were allowed to write like this. I had to check, is this an adult? Because it's so funny. It's so funny, but it's also incredibly stupid. It's incredibly stupid. So I felt, how did other adults let him publish a book like this? Because I couldn't imagine that an adult would think, I was surrounded by adults who were very serious, who thought that literature was a very serious thing. You sat down, you read a book, you did not. I had never seen anyone read a book and laugh. That had never happened to me, and I was 9 years old, and I read Douglas Adams. I was laughing out loud. I was reading it, and I was laughing so much, I had tears in my eyes, and I thought, I didn't know that you were allowed to be funny in literature, and it changed my whole world. So I think out of all the classical novelists, I was very, in my teenage years, I was also very inspired by James Clavell, who wrote Shogun and Taipan, because it's grand adventures. You're 13 years old, you think this is, you want to go on an adventure. But nothing has been more important than Douglas Adams, because he was the first one who made me laugh. Sorry for the long answer.
저에게 영감을 준 사람들을 좀 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 물론 이제 고전의 그런 구조는 제가 많이 가져옵니다. 그래서 예를 들어서 아스트리드 린드그렌의 페피 롱스토킹스, 빨간머리 말괄량이 삐삐와 같은 이런 이제 이야기들을 보면 아동 문학을 쓰셨고 전래동화 그런 이제 영향을 받기도 했고요. 아니면 뭐 해리포터나 스타워즈에 이르기까지 그런 영웅의 아크를 사실은 제가 이야기에서 많이 가져옵니다. 물론 우주에서 이제 그런 이야기의 배경을 두지 않고 작은 동네에서 시작할 뿐입니다. 그리고 그런 미국의 작가들, 그러니까 뭐 위기 절정의 순간들, 그리고 그런 거대한 감정들을 많이 다루기도 하고요. 세 번째는 또 영국의 유머에 큰 영향을 받습니다. 물론 뭐 스웨덴의 작가들이랑 해밍웨이, 포크너, 마거렛 애트우드에 이렇게까지 이런 고전적인 소설들도 좋아하긴 합니다만 제일 좋아하는 그리고 가장 큰 영향을 준 것은 더글라스 애덤스. 그래서 우주로서 은하수를 여행하는 히치하이커를 위한 안내서를 쓴 그 작가가 어떻게 보면 저의 작가로서의 가치관을 가장 크게 형성을 했는데요. 9세, 10세 때 읽었을 때, 아, 이렇게 미친 사람이 있구나. 소설이 이렇게 재밌을 수 있다니 하고 빵 터지면서 울면서 볼 정도였거든요. 그 전까지는 소설을 읽을 때 어른들이 쓰는 매우 심각한 이야기일 거라고 생각했을 뿐입니다.
Well, thank you so much. I might as well just move on to the next question, which is question number 4 in the thing, because you mentioned America and so on, and certainly you wrote in your mother tongue, and your fellow countrymen certainly, and women, like your works very much. But you've gained an international fame through the translations into English, done by, I find, just a couple of translators, whom I'm sure you are familiar with, and so on. So, and you also have an excellent command of English, as we all find now. So, what are you generally satisfied with your English translators, or do you feel any pressure, perhaps, in trying to moderate your writing in such a way as to make them more translatable? Because if you stick too much to the local features and to idioms and so forth, the works would become quite difficult to translate. So, any thoughts about translations at all?
네, 영어 번역과 미국 출판업계를 통해서 국제적인 팬층을 얻게 되었는데요. 영어 번역을 어떤 식으로 이제 쓰시면서 염두해 두시는지 궁금했고요. 번역 과정에서 혹시 잘 살리지 못한 부분이 있거나 아니면 번역서들에 대해서 어떤 의견을 갖고 계신지 궁금합니다.
Well, it's very difficult because when I started writing, I had no idea that it would be translated. When I wrote A Man Called Ove, the critics in Sweden didn't like it very much. They thought it was stupid, and they didn't consider it fine literature, so to speak, which I'm fine with. But I think, several of them wrote that this will never travel abroad, that this will never work internationally, because Ove is such a Swedish character. No one in another country would understand this because everything is so Swedish. And I thought that too. And then it traveled all over the world, and I still don't know why. So I still don't know what it is that people like and don't like. I have no idea. I have no idea why people read it in one country, in countries that are so far from my own country. I think with the translations, I do read the translations. I have very good editors. I work very closely with my American editor, who I have a great relationship with, and I've worked with him since my first book. He's one of the people, Peter Borland, at Simon & Schuster in the US, and he's been with me for so long that I trust him. He also knows, even though he doesn't understand Swedish, he understands my way of saying something. So if he gets a translation, very often he gets a translation, and he makes a note for me, and he sends it to me. He says, "This doesn't feel like you're writing." And then almost always it's no, the translator misunderstood. But he instinctively know when it's not my writing. He just feels that because he's been reading everything I've written for 10 years. So that really helps. I go through the translations a lot. We talk about them a lot. I don't go in and change every word, because if you change one thing at the beginning, you have to change it everywhere throughout the book. And it's also a rhythm that the translator has a rhythm where the way I tell something, I might use short sentences. I like short sentences. But sometimes the translator will make the sentence, instead of a full stop, he'll use a comma and make the sentence longer, but that's his rhythm. And as long as it's true to his rhythm throughout, I think it works, because the important thing to me is that the story comes across, the characters come across. The most important thing to me is not that my language comes across. It's not the most important thing. The most important to me is the story and the characters. So I think it will change a little in translation. There will always be an adaptation and interpretation. But I think the only thing that I had to change when my book started getting translated, the only thing that I was told by foreign publishers was, please try to make word puns. A joke that is based on this is funny because this word also means this word. My example would be that in Swedish, which is a very small language, we're 10 million people. There are less people living in my country than in this city. So we're a very small country, very small language. But I would make a joke because in Swedish, the word for poison is also the word for marriage. It's the same word. So if you say that you're married, that's also the word for poison, which is funny if you're Swedish. That's a funny joke. You can make a lot of jokes about that. But of course, I had maybe 15 jokes like that in A Man Called Ove that are only funny in Swedish. And then my translators had to find another way to tell the same joke, but in their language. So they were very upset. So I had to rewrite all those jokes. I got a list from my German translator and my French translator. I get lists of this is an impossible joke to translate. Please write another joke. Please try to be stupid, but in another way. So it is tricky, but I'm trying to make less word puns. But otherwise, I think most of the things I try to write the same way, and I think it works because I very rarely write about one place. I never write that this takes place in this and this city or this and this part of Sweden, or I try to write I think the Americans call that technique somewhere, anywhere. You want to write about a city, you want to write about people, but make it feel like it could take place anywhere. That's how I try to. I want people to feel like they can put their own environments in there and understand it from their point of view.
오베라는 남자는 비평가들에게 굉장히 악평을 받았었고요. 절대 뭐 문학으로서의 가치가 없다라는 평가를 받았습니다만, 저 또한 오베라는 남자가 스웨덴 문화의 정수이기 때문에 먹힐 거라고 생각을 하지는 않았습니다. 하지만 지금까지도 이렇게 사랑을 많이 받고 있고 사람들이 많이 공감하는, 교감하는 캐릭터이긴 한데 왜 그런지는 정확하게 모르겠습니다. 저의 에디터는 한 10년간 저의 그런 여러 제가 썼던 책들을 다 읽었기 때문에 어떻게 보면 그를 믿고 함께 긴밀하게 일을 하고 있고요. 오히려 걔가 번역서를 보면서 이거는 네가 말하는 방식이 아닌 것 같아 라고 얘기를 할 때마다 거의 정확하더라고요. 그래서 번역사들의 그런 단어를 다 고치다 보면 다 고쳐야 되기 때문에 오히려 그들의 리듬을 제가 방해하지 않고 존중을 해주고 있습니다. 그리고 언어보다는 스토리나 캐릭터가 살리는 것이 되게 중요하다고 생각합니다만 여기서 wordpan, 그러니까 단어가 이제 농담인 것만은 제가 좀 피해달라라는 번역사들의 피드백을 최대한 살리려고 노력을 하고 있습니다.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That actually takes me back to the third question, which I was going to jump. So, you write stories about Sweden, and all your characters are Swedish. And what sort of criterion or what kind of motivations drive you to choose one type of character over another, and so on? I mean, I wrote here whether they are funny, interesting, have some entertainment values, or they're eccentric, or whether they represent different sectors of society. Up and down, left and right. You mentioned how you try to cater to the need for variety of different kinds of people and so forth. So how do you choose your characters and how do you invent them? Quite simply put.
캐릭터들을 창작할 때 무엇을 중요하게 생각하시는지 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
I wish I had a better answer. I should have now because people have been asking me this for 10 years. I still don't know. I don't know where I get things from. It's just I steal from real people. I tend to say, people always ask me, is this character based on a real person? And I always say, no, he's based on maybe 20 real people. And my not so super smart analogy is that to me, writing a character is it's like orange juice. It takes a lot of oranges to make one glass of juice. It takes a lot of real people to make one good character. You steal a little bit from here and a little bit from there. I steal, maybe this is a funny way to talk. I meet someone, that's a funny way to talk. That's a funny way to be. That's a funny way to dress. That's I look for the weird things. I look for the awkward things. I like weird people. Because I've been trying to be normal my whole life and I don't know how to do it. I'm not very good at, you go to a dinner party. I always talk too little or too much. I'm either quiet the entire evening or you can't shut me up. There's nothing in between. There's no, if you go from 1 to 10, I'm never at a 6 or 7. I'm always at a 1 or a 10. And I've been like that my entire life. And it's very good to be like that if you're a writer. It's very bad to be like that if you're a person. So if I had a normal job, this would be a problem. But if I'm a writer, it's great. Because I look for the strange things in other people. I look for the awkwardness. I look for difficult people. I like people who get into arguments a lot. I like people who get into fights. I like if you're traveling, if you're at an airport and there's a married couple and they start fighting, that's the best thing for me. I just want to be very close to that because I just want to hear, how do you fight? What do you say to each other? How do you, what annoys you about him? What annoys you about her? I like that. I enjoy that. I enjoy friction with people. So I look for weirdness. I look for difficult people. I look for people who don't fit in. And then when I write about a character, I look for the smallest emotion that we have in common. And with a man called Ove, for example, it's loneliness. He is immensely lonely. And I know what that's like because I was a very lonely child. And I didn't understand how lonely I was until I met my wife. Because that was the first time in my life that I didn't feel lonely. That was the first time in my life that I had someone where I felt, oh, you think I'm weird, but you like that. It's okay. I can be who I am with you. I don't have to act. I don't have to play games with you. I don't have to pretend to be someone else with you. I can just be who I am. That was the first time in my life that happened. So I could understand his. So when I wrote about Ove, it was loneliness. So I try to find the smallest possible emotion that we have in common. And sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's anxiety. But they're always, I look for the smallest emotion that we have in common and I start there. That's how I build characters. And then, I steal from strangers at airports.
10년간 물어본 것 치고는 그럴싸한 그런 답변은 없습니다만 여기저기에서 훔친다고 생각하시면 될 것 같습니다. 정말 사람들의 특이한 점들을 제가 이렇게 짜집기를 하고 있고요. 회사원이었으면 아마 문제가 됐을 거라고 생각합니다만 작가라서 참 다행입니다. 논쟁이나 아니면 정말 까칠한 사람들을 굉장히 좋아합니다. 공항에서 사람들이 만약에 커플이 싸운다면 거기서는 완전 엑기스를 뽑으려고 최대한 노력을 하고 있고요. 사람들 중에서 이상하거나 특이하거나 사람들과 자주 싸우거나 송곳처럼 튀어나온 사람들을 매우 좋아합니다. 그 캐릭터로부터 나와 비슷한 감정이 무엇인가. 예를 들어서 오베 같은 경우는 사무치게 외로운 사람이었기 때문에 제가 또 어렸을 때부터 외로웠다는 것을 외로움을 많이 느꼈었거든요. 그래서 와이프를 만나고 나서는 이렇게 이상한 점을 좋아해 주다니 나의 안식처, 나의 솔직한 것을 다 보여줄 수 있는 사람을 만났다는 것에 대해서 큰 감동을 받았습니다.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think I'll lump together all the other questions because there are more questions from the audience. And if you may, perhaps, can you say something about the kind of community relationship, society, whatever you want to call this, that we can still maintain in this day and age, or given all these pressures of ecology, politics, divided politics, and all the other things? terrorism, for instance, I think is quite a problem in your part of the world as well as in elsewhere and so on. So can humans really put up with each other? I mean, even as in your example of this married couple, they still stay married, apparently, despite and travel together, do they? Or should they perhaps part their ways and be something else and so forth? So how can society stay together? I think that's also one of the questions raised by the audience, in your view. Right.
네, 백맨 작가님께서는 사회가 굉장히 화합적이어야 한다, 아니면 어느 정도 이렇게 함께 화합을 해야 된다, 긍정적인 메시지를 담는 경우가 많습니다만, 그 주제에 대해서 조금 더 얘기해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
I think you need to ask smarter people than me. I mean, I'm not a politician. I'm also not an academic, so I don't have answers for that. I think when I view people, when I write about people, it is not strange to me that people fight. It is a miracle to me that people don't fight all the time. It is unbelievable to me that people actually do function as a society and as a family, and that it's not weird to me that people fight. It's weird to me that we don't fight all the time, and I think it says I go looking for the things that makes us not fight. I go looking for the things that we do have in common. I'm not a politician. I'm not trying to write something politically. I'm not trying to make a political statement when I write. I never did. I'm just trying to tell a story. If I lived 500-600 years ago, I would be one of those people who walked from village to village and told stories for money, told stories for coins. That's what I would be, because that's what I do. I would bring gossip from the next village. But that's not the way that I write. The way that I write is that I make the basic assumption that people at their core are mostly the same. I make the assumption, coming here is first of all, I don't like to travel. I'm not very good at traveling. I'm a very grumpy person. I don't like new things. If it was up to me, I would probably just be at home at all times with my dog and never meet any people except for my family. But my career is different. So I try to do this, and I try to travel, and I try to meet new people, and I try to be okay with it. I have a lot of anxiety. I work a lot with my anxiety. But when I do travel, I make the assumption that you and I and the people in here and the people I meet in America or in Scandinavia or the people who read my books in India, I make the assumption that people are mostly the same. You want to be safe. You want to be happy. You want to feel meaningful. You want someone to love, and you want someone to love you. If you have children, you want your children to be safe. You want them to be happy, and you want them to be able to follow their dreams. You want to have a decent life. You want to come home at the end of the day. You want to sit down at a table. You want to eat dinner with the people you love. That's pretty much it. And everything else is these are just the things that we add. These are just the bonuses of life. But basically, I think most people are the same. Most people want the same things. And I make that assumptions when I write. And I never think, I never think, what will people think in another country? What will people think in Germany or in the United States or in South Korea? What will people think? I just make the assumption that this is important to me, this is true to me, and I hope that it means something to you too. And then I just figured that somewhere down the line, everyone is just gonna find out that this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and then they're gonna stop buying my books. And then I'll be at home with my dog.
네, 저는 사람들을 관찰할 때는 오히려 이렇게 다른데 항상 싸우지 않다니 하고 신기할 정도이거든요. 이렇게 사회가 기능하고 가족들이 기능한다는 게 신기할 정도입니다. 하지만 사람들 간에는 공통점이 확실히 많다고 생각을 하거든요. 만약에 제가 한 5, 600년 전에 태어났으면 다른 마을에서 이 마을에 뭐 그런 근황이나 소식, 소문들을 전하는 사람이 되었을 거라고 생각합니다. 저에게 영감을 주는 것은 사실 새로운 것이나 새로운 여행지를 가는 것은 아니거든요. 그래서 굉장히 스트레스를 많이 받습니다. 그래서 제가 만약에 선택을 할 수 있다면 항상 집이나 강아지랑 산책을 했을 거라고 생각을 하고요. 이렇게 새로운 곳의 경험을 새롭게 하는 것은 항상 불안감을 저에게 준 거라고 생각을 합니다. 근데 글을 쓸 때 저는 북유럽이든 미국이든 한국이든 간에 비슷한 점이 많을 거라는 전제하에서 생각을 합니다. 사람들은 다 안정감을 느끼고 싶어하고 행복감, 의미를 찾고자 하는 그런 객체들이다. 그리고 이제 나중에 회사나 뭐 일을 하고 나서 저녁 식사를 하고 나서 사랑하는 이들과 밥을 먹는 것을 원하지 않을까. 이 정도라고 생각하고 그 이상은 보너스이다라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 그런 가설로 글을 쓰고 있고요.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sure that was a very inspiring statement of how it's a miracle that we don't fight all the time. I think I shall tell that to my wife when I go home. So, okay. Since I can't really monopolize the entire time, I think I'll just share some of these questions which the audience asked me to share with you. And they want to know whether you are happy with the cinema versions of your novels. There was one cinema made in Sweden, another one in the United States. Now, this is certainly a different medium altogether. Storytelling is somewhat absent in this series of pictures and so forth. So the narrator is somehow silenced in the cinema. And that's me adding to this question. So is it all right for you to see your stories turned into films?
사실 오베라는 남자는 스웨덴하고 미국에 그런 두 번에 걸쳐서 영화가 되었는데요. 원작자로서 어떻게 생각하시는지 궁금합니다.
It is incredibly strange. It's an incredibly strange process. We figured out very early on that I am not allowed to be in meetings with film people. My wife handles all the meetings. So my wife and our agent, they go to all the meetings because I'm not very good at meetings. And people think that I tend to take the meeting. If I'm in a meeting, it's a 9-hour meeting. If my wife goes to a meeting, it's 15 minutes. So what? And it's also that I can't do anything if I don't do it at 100%. So I can't be a little involved. Then I'm involved all the way. And I'm a pretty exhausting person to be around, and I know that. I know that this is a bad side of me. So what we did was my wife and I and our agent, we figured out very early on that what you do is, if you want to make a movie, you find the best possible people you can, and you fight with them before the movie starts. You have all the things that you need to fight about, all the things that you don't agree on. You have those arguments before you start. But then as soon as they start making the movie, you let them do their job. Because otherwise it's, what's the word? It's a compromise. If too many people are involved, then everything is a compromise. And I think when you see a movie and you feel like, why isn't this good? You do that sometimes. You feel they obviously have a lot of money. They have great actors. They have a great director. You know, they made this whole movie, this whole set. I mean, this must have taken a lot of time for hundreds of people, cost a lot of money, but I don't feel anything. Like I should feel it. It should be good, but it isn't. I don't feel anything when I watch this movie. They do all the right things, but I don't feel anything. I think that comes from too many people being involved and a lot of compromises. And then you won't feel anything. It has to be someone's vision. So what we do is we leave it to someone else and we let them do their jobs. And often we're very happy. And in the case with both movies, we're incredibly happy with them. I'm incredibly proud of them. They're very different. There was also a stage adaptation in Sweden by a comedian who made a monologue on stage. And he played it, I think, 120 times or something. And it was hugely successful. And it was also very different. So it's an adaptation. Someone takes what you did and they make an interpretation of it. And you have to be fine with that. And if you're not fine with that, as my wife often tells me, if you're not fine with it, Fredrik, then don't give them the rights. You can say no. You don't have to let them make a movie. You can say no. But if you sign the papers, you let them do it, then let them do it. Let them work. So that has been our viewpoint of it. But we are very happy with the movies. And I mean, when they said, can Tom Hanks make the movie? Yes, he can. Do you have notes for Mr. Hanks? No, I don't. Let him do whatever he wants. But it turned out very well.
I hope your novel about that grandmother, which I like very much, will be turned into a film soon, because I mean there are lots of
we'll see how it goes.
Candidates. Yes,
it's a difficult thing to make a movie out of.
Okay, I think I'll stop here because we need to reserve time for the members of the audience. 여러분들 질문 맞죠?
네, 질문 생각하시는 동안 짤막하게 제가 번역을 하겠습니다. 그래서 제가 사실 미팅을 하지 않거든요. 그래서 와이프랑 제 이제 에이전트에게 전적으로 맡기고 있습니다. 저는 사실 완벽을 추구하기 때문에 100%의 자유를 주지 않으면 아예 시도조차 하지 않는 성격입니다. 영화를 하는 데 있어서 사실 제작이 들어가기 전까지는 최대한 주장하고 싸워야 그 다음에는 이제 시작하고 나서는 전적으로 맡겨야 된다라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 뱃사공이 사실 너무 많으면 산으로 가는 경우가 많고 애매해지고 누구의 비전도 나오지 않기 때문에 감동이 없다고 생각을 하고요. 전적으로 맡기니 오베라는 남자 같은 경우에는 두 버전 다 굉장히 만족하고 독백을 많이 이용하는 희극도 있었는데 그거는 120회 공연할 정도로 성공을 했습니다. 사실 계약을 사인하고 나선 전적으로 맡기고 있고요. 제가 감히 톰 행크스에게 어떻게 노트를 주겠습니까?
네, 훌륭한 대담을 진행해 주신 베크만 작가님, 윤혜준 교수님께 감사드립니다. 다음 순서는 질의응답 시간입니다. 지금 그러면 청중분들께 질문을 받도록 하겠습니다. 가급적 작가님께 개인적인 정보에 대한 질문을 삼가 주시고 작품에 대한 질문을 부탁드립니다. 네, 3-4분 정도 질문을 받겠습니다. 질문이 있으신 분은 손을 들어주세요.
안녕하세요. 혹시 영어로 질문하면 되나요? Hi, I am a great fan of yours since I think elementary school. I read all of your works. My question is, one of the characteristics I noticed while reading your works is that there are a lot of characters other than the main characters that each have their own very specific stories that touch the reader's heart, I think. So I wanted to ask if you had a favorite character other than the main characters of your novels, which one would that be? And how you create the stories of each of the side characters around the main characters. Thank you.
네, 메인 캐릭터보다 마이너 캐릭터들이 더 매력적이라고 많이 생각을 했는데요. 어떤 최애 캐릭터를 갖고 계신지 궁금합니다.
The way I create them, first of all, you're making me feel very old when you say that I started reading you in elementary school. Making me feel very, very old. Incredibly old. But I think the way I create side characters is, I know it's the wrong way, because if you go to a writing class, if someone is teaching you writing, if you go then they will say you can only keep the characters who move the story forward. Only keep the characters who keep the story moving forward. And I do the exact opposite. Because as soon as I always have way more characters to begin with. If there are 7 characters by the end, there were probably 20 to begin with. That's how I make the stories shorter at the end. I take characters out. And the way I do that is if I feel that this character I only constructed this character to move the story forward. And I try to be honest with myself. Is this character really a character? Is this really a human being to me? Do I care about this character? Do I care about this human being? Or is it, I just made him so that he would be there, so that the main character could go there, get information, and go. Is it like a video game? Did I just place that character there so that something else could happen, so that we can move forward? Well, then it's not a real human being to me, and that character has to go. That's my rule. And then I have to find another way. I have to make it difficult for me, because then I have to find another way for that thing to happen. I have to figure that out. And that always makes the story better. Always creating that difficulty. So that's my only rule. If the character is not a human being to me, if I don't care about the character, it has to go. Because then it's not a fully formed character. It has to be a human being. It can't just be can't just be cardboard. It has to be a full human being. So that's why the characters who stay are the ones that I've thought so much about them, that they do have backstories. They do have, they're fully formed individuals. But I think as soon as it's just a cardboard, you can, it looks good from the front, but as soon as you look from the side, it's just cardboard. This is not a real, that's my only thing. I think the characters that I like the most are the animals. I like writing animals because I like writing characters who doesn't speak. I enjoy that very much. I like finding a way to express emotion, but where they don't speak. I like the cat. I like writing the cat. I like writing cats in general, because I like trying to explain the way that they look at you. Like the cat in A Man Called Ove. There's a line where it says, the cat looks at Ove like Ove owes the cat money. That's a very specific way for a cat to look, and everyone who has a cat knows that look. They look at you accusingly, like you owe them something. And I find that very funny, and so I go looking for that. So I enjoy writing animals. I think that's my best answer.
네, 사실 사이드 캐릭터라는 표현이 옳지는 않을 것 같긴 합니다만, 이제 만약에 라이팅 클래스를 한 번이라도 들으셨으면, 스토리나 플롯을 움직이는 캐릭터만 살려야 된다라고 얘기를 합니다. 근데 저는 완전 반대로 하거든요. 이 캐릭터에 대해서 내가 정말 감성적으로 호소를 할 수 있는가? 그를 정말 호감을 갖는가라는 질문을 계속 되새기고 있습니다. 그리고 캐릭터가 있을 때 만약에 메인 캐릭터가 그런 어느 퀘스트를 달성하기 위해서 NPC와 같은 역할을 한다라고 했을 경우에는 과감하게 삭제를 합니다. 그래서 그런 식으로 플롯을 이어나가기 위해서는 굉장히 복잡하게 제 자신을 허들을 높이기 합니다만, 그래도 그렇게 하다 보면 오히려 이야기가 더 완성도 있게 나오더라고요. 그래서 저의 이런 사이드 캐릭터들은 어떻게 보면 그 배경도 훨씬 더 다양하고 2차원적이기보다는 4차원적인 캐릭터가 나오는 이유가 바로 거기입니다. 저는 또 무언의 캐릭터들에 대해서 굉장히 좋아하는데요. 예를 들어 고양이들이 돈을 갚아야지 이런 식으로 시선을 보낸다면 그게 오베에서 나오는 그런 장면인데, 그런 동물들에 대해서 쓰는 것도 굉장히 좋아합니다.
네, 다음 질문 받아보겠습니다. 이번에는 저 끝에 살구색 가디건 입으신 분.
네, 저도 영어로 질문드리겠습니다. First of all, thanks for visiting Korea, and I'm great honored to be here. And I was wondering, you've already published a lot of books, so do you have any routine or habits for writing?
다작의 작가이신데요. 루틴을 알려주시면 감사하겠습니다.
If I have habits and routines for writing, that's the question, right?
Yes.
Yep. No. I wish I did. No, I really wish I did because I want to, because people always ask me, especially young people ask me because they want me to teach them how to write. I don't know. I have no routine. It's chaos. It's absolute chaos. I share an office with the most brilliant person that I know. He's called Niklas Nattokdag, a very weird Swedish name. He writes historical fiction. He wrote a story called 1793 that takes place in 1793 in Stockholm, and everything is historically correct because he researches and he's incredibly smart. When he works, he opens his computer and he has every character has their own spreadsheet. So he opens Microsoft Excel, and then every character has its own Microsoft Excel document, and every chapter is its own Word document, and he has lists, and he draws things on a board on the wall like a serial killer, and he has pictures, and it looks like he's so organized, and I have nothing of that. And I wish I did. I really tried, but I don't. It's just chaos. I have 17 notes. I write things down everywhere. So I write things down on envelopes at home, which drives my wife insane. Because I write something, I have an idea, like, oh, this is really good. This, I'm going to use this. I write it down on an envelope, and then I lose the envelope. And then 6 weeks later, I go to my wife, have you possibly seen an envelope with something written on it? Because it was genius, and now I can't find it, and I can't remember. And it's a chaotic process. I never know what happens. I have a million notes everywhere, and I think about it all of the time. That's my only trick. People always ask me if I have a writing routine, because people feel like, oh, because that's the way that writers, you read about writers in interviews, and they say, oh, I get up 6 o'clock every morning and I have a cup of tea and I sit down and I write 5,000 characters and I do that. And I don't know how to do that. My only thing is that I have routines for thinking. Like I tell my kids, when my kids and I fight, which we do a lot, it's because I tell them that Dad's job is weird, but Dad's job is to think. Like 90% of my job is to think. It's not to write, because the writing, if you have a really good idea, if you really think an idea through, then you're going to write it down, because you're going to write it down because it's so good that you're afraid that you're going to forget it if you don't write it down. That's how you start writing. That's how it becomes a book, because it's so good and it's so crowded in your head that you have to write it down. That's when the writing happens. I just give myself routines for thinking. Like I have a dog, and she's crazy, but I love her. But we go out into the forest, and we walk in the forest for 2 hours. And I don't use headphones. I don't listen to a podcast. I don't listen to music. When I'm alone, I very rarely I very rarely watch a movie or watch a TV. I just think. I put myself in situations where I'm bored, and then I think. And I tell myself I'm going to go out for a walk now for 2 hours, and we're going to figure out this problem that I have with this character. But if you write, it's a series of problems that you have to overcome. So, a very long answer, I'm sorry. You have to figure out a lot of problems, like, oh, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. How did this character come here? Like, how did he travel there? How did he find this information out? How will I tell the reader this piece of information? Because the reader needs to know this about this character to understand what's happening. How do I how do I solve this problem? Whenever I have a problem like that, I tell myself, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go for a walk until I figure it out. And then I'm just thinking about that. So I'm not thinking about buying groceries, or I wonder why that celebrity doesn't like that celebrity, or I don't watch TikTok. I don't do all the other things. I just focus on this problem. And so I think it's more important to have a routine for thinking. I think people should give themselves 1 hour a day where they just think, where they just shut off their phone and say, I'm just going to think now for an hour. And you can do that anywhere. You can do that on the bus or, but just have an hour every day where you try to think about your writing. I think that makes all the difference. Sorry for the long answer.
네.
If that
사실
makes sense, I don't know.
그런 방법론이 있었으면 좋겠습니다만 그냥 혼동 그 자체라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 오피스를 함께 이제 쓰고 있는 니클라스 나트 오크다그 작가님 같은 경우에는 정말 엑셀의 귀재거든요. 그래서 이런 역사물들을 많이 쓰시는데 그와 같은 방식으로 절대로 쓰지는 못하고요. 저는 그냥 봉투에 아이디어가 번뜩일 때마다 끄적이고 있습니다. 그 다음에 6주 후에 어디 갔었지? 하고 와이프에게 물어볼 정도고요. 근데 루틴이라고 물어보시잖아요. 그래서 뭐 6시에 기상하고 5천자를 매일 쓴다 이런 답변을 아마 기대를 하셨을 거라고 생각합니다만 저는 그냥 90%의 시간을 오로지 사고하는 데 사용을 한다고 생각합니다. 그래서 메모가 이거는 메모에 꼭 써야 해라고 번뜩일 정도면 그게 바로 책의 시발점이 된다고 생각합니다. 그래서 예를 들어서 이 캐릭터가 이 공간에 도달하기 위해서 무엇이 필요할까라는 문제에 이제 제가 직면하게 되면 2시간 동안 아니면 그 이상 동안은 개와 함께 고요한 숲 산책을 하면서 그 문제를 풀 때까지 제가 절대로 돌아오지 않습니다. 그런 잡생각을 아예 안 하고 그냥 정말 생각만 하는 거죠. 그래서 여러분께 조언을 할 수 있는 바는 뭐 1시간 정도, 하루에 1시간 정도는 폰을 아예 끄고 한번 사고를 하고 생각을 하는 거에 한번 흠뻑 빠지셨으면 좋겠습니다.
네, 또 다음 질문 받겠습니다. 이번에는 이쪽에서 여기 앞에서 네 번째 하얀색 하늘색 옷 입으신 분.
Hello, my name is Jin Seo, and I'm a grad school student studying English literature. I'm such a fan of yours. I'm so nervous right now. My question is, when I was reading your books, the one thing I noticed is that you write such nonchalant, simple sentences that have amazing emotional impact. So I always get thrown back as to how this simple sentence gives me such great emotional responses. It's almost like magic. And I was wondering, well, how do you do it? Yeah, thank you.
작가님, 그 문장은 이렇게 간단한데 어떻게 이렇게 호소력 있는 그런 문장들, 감정들을 쓰시는지 궁금합니다.
I don't know. I don't know. I look for complicated emotions, which makes me very complicated to live with, because I don't know the word in English. We have a word in Swedish for when you can't let something go. You just go on and on and on and on and on and on about it until you drive other people crazy. I do that with everything. But I look for complicated emotions. And I go looking for the simplest way to explain it. So I look for, like, I have this very complicated emotion. I'm upset about something, or I'm sad about something, and I go looking for the simplest way that I can explain it. I look for one sentence to explain that very complicated emotion. I think maybe it's because I'm surrounded by people who I drive crazy, because I try to explain to them how I feel, and I have to find the simplest way to explain it. You know, when I'm upset with my kids, which I am often, and we fight, I have to find a way to explain to them why I'm upset. And if you explain to a child why you're upset, it's very rarely that you did this thing that was wrong, but it's also representing something else. You know what I mean? It's, say a child steals a pack of gum at the store. It costs like nothing. It's not but that's not the important thing. It's not the important thing what you stole. The important thing is that I have to teach you that you can't steal. It's wrong to steal. That's a very complicated thing to explain to a child. So what you're trying to do is you try to find the simplest way to explain it. That's what I do with emotions. That I have this very complicated emotion about death or loneliness or sadness or fear or anxiety, and I try to find the simplest way that I can explain it, what's going on inside of me. And then I hope that maybe that resonates with you. Maybe you feel like, yeah, that's kind of what's going on with me too. Or maybe you will read it and you will think, oh, maybe that's why my mother is weird. You know, maybe that's why I don't get along with my mother, because this is how she feels, but she doesn't know how to put that into a context that I understand. That's what I do. I think what I try to do is being a translator, but between very, very difficult people and normal people. I try to be a bridge. So that's the easiest way that I can explain it. But I very often look for one sentence. Like, can I find one sentence? And I look for that punch in me. I think that's the only secret. Sorry, long answer again. But if you want to be a writer, my only trick is that if you write a joke, you have to laugh at it. You can't write a joke and think, oh, other people will find this funny. Do you find it funny? Are you laughing? Because the best thing I've ever heard about writing is a writer, Grant Morrison. He writes comics books. He wrote Batman, among other things. But he said, someone asked him at a signing, how is it that I have never met can write something that makes me cry? And he said, I don't know. But I can only assume that it's because I was crying when I wrote it. And it's an extension of that. And that's the smartest thing I've ever heard about writing. If you cry when you read it, it's because I cried when I was writing it. If you find it difficult to read, it's because it was very, very difficult for me to write. I was going through something. And that's the easiest way for me to explain it. And I look for one sentence that punches me in the chest. And I look for something that kind of makes me lose balance a little bit. And then I know, okay, this could be something.
네, 저는 복잡한 감정을 완전 obsessive하게 들고 파는 것이 어떻게 보면 그게 가장 쉽게 전달할 방법을 찾는 것이 저의 이제 글쓰기의 비결이라고 볼 수 있습니다. 그래서 정말 복합적인 감정들을 마치 내 딸이나 아들이나 어린아이에게 설명을 하듯이 내 감정을 최대한 쉽게 설명할 수 있을까? 예를 들어 왜 화가 났는가, 껌을 훔쳤을 때 왜 화가 났는가, 그 이면의 그런 거대한 가치들을 어떻게 최대한 쉽게 설명을 할 수 있는가를 찾습니다. 그래서 그렇게 한다면 독자들이 공감을 해줄 것이고, 그다음에 이제 주변의 사람이나 아니면 사회를 이해하는데 도움이 되지 않을까, 번역가처럼 그런 역할을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 하나의 센텐스로 최대한 쓰려고 노력을 하시면 그런 작가 지망생들에게 좀 도움이 되지 않을까 싶습니다. 그리고 좀 joke, 그러니까 재미있는 얘기를 처음에 쓴다고 했을 때는 스스로 먼저 자기가 웃어야 된다고 생각하거든요.
You're running out of pages.
네, 또 질문 있으신가요? 이번에는 좀 끝부분에서 받도록 할게요. 저기 오른쪽 까만 옷 입으신 분데, 네, 맞아요.
저도 영어로 바로 My question could be a little broad, but I'm really wanted to ask you about your dream, because I thought you have already success and everyone knows your name, but I really want to know what your next step could be. Thank you.
워낙 유명한 작가이시니 앞으로의 꿈이나 행보에 대해서 굉장히 궁금합니다.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear everything.
What is your dream? Considering that you're already a very successful writer, she wants to know what's your next step, what's your dream, what's your goal?
Oh, that's a good question. It is a really good question because I don't really have. It's a certain kind of existential crisis when you achieve much more than you thought you would. It's strange. I don't have I don't have any dreams as a writer. The only thing that I would like to do is I would like to do this for 30 years more. I would like to do, I'm 43 now. I would love to do this until I'm 70. I would love to be 70, 80 years old and still be able to write. And I would love to feel that I'm still relevant, that I still have things to say, that I still can find a new way to write, a new way to make a joke, a new way to I think that's the only, I would like to do it for as long as I could. That would be my absolute dream. And because also a lot of my heroes, a lot of the writers that I really look up to, they wrote some of their best novels after 60. So I think if I can do this for 17 years more, maybe I'll write something great. Maybe that's when it happens for me. But no, I would love to write for this for long. And then other than that, you're very young. But other than that, you get to my age, all the dreams that you have are dreams for your children. All the things that you want are things that you want for them. You want, and most of all, you want them to be happy, which they never understand. But it is at a certain point, all your dreams are for that. But other than that, I just I like my life very much, and you know, I'm good. But I would like to do this for longer. Yes.
사실 목표했던 것보다 더 많은, 상상할 수 없는 큰 성공을 이루면 존재적 위기감을 느끼는 사람들도 있긴 합니다만 저는 그렇진 않습니다. 지금의 삶에 굉장히 만족하고 있고요. 제가 이제 만으로 이제 43세인데 70세, 80세까지 이렇게 일관되게 글을 계속 쓸 수 있으면 참 좋겠다라는 것이 저의 꿈이라고 볼 수 있습니다. 물론 이 이야기나 농담들을 좀 새로운 방식으로 쓰기는 좋을 것 같고요. 하지만 최대한 길게, 가늘게 이야기꾼으로 커리어를 계속 유지를 했으면 좋겠습니다. 제가 또 좋아하는 여러 이제 영웅들은 60세 이후에 굉장히 대작들을 쓰셨거든요. 그래서 저도 계속 노력을 한다면, 그리고 계속 글을 쓸 수 있다면 그 반열에 오를 수 있지 않을까라고 꿈을 꿉니다. 40세 정도 되면 결국에는 꿈이라는 거는 제 아이들이거든요. 그래서 그들이 행복하기를 바라는 아버지의 마음을 갖고는 있긴 합니다만 그들은 청소년들이라 잘 모르겠죠.
네, 시간 관계상 마지막 질문을 받겠습니다. 저기 앞에서 네 번째 흰 티셔츠, 가운데 흰 티셔츠 입으신 분. 네, 손 계속 들어주세요.
Hello. It's wonderful to meet the person who wrote about Maya and Benji and Ahmad. I want to ask you a question about Beartown. It's about sports and a really small town in a rural area of Sweden, I think. And I was always curious about how you did the research, because it seemed, as a person who loves sports and like lived in a small town, it seemed very personal, and it seemed very like the people interacting with each other. It seemed very deep. So I wanted to know how you looked it up. Thank you.
네, 베어타운에 대한 질문인데요. 이런 작은 마을에서 일어나는 그런 하키에서 일어나는 이야기에 대해서 쓰셨는데 어떤 식으로 조사를 했길래 이렇게 실감났는지 궁금합니다.
No, again, I wish I had a better answer. I wish I could tell you this is how to go about it. It's not a straight path to me. It's with Beartown. I start with a set of characters in my head. I start with a premise. I start with a world, and then from there, when I have that the basic story, when I know the story that I want to tell, then I start looking at the world and start figuring out what part of this world don't I know, like what parts of this world do I know a little bit about, what can I use, and what do I need to go out and research. I've played a lot of sports. I played almost every sport there was when I was a kid. but I didn't play hockey, ice hockey. It was the only sport and it's huge in Sweden. I know it's not a big sport in South Korea, but it's a huge sport. I think maybe equivalent to what baseball is to you. I don't know, but it's a sport that is huge in Sweden and maybe 7 other countries. But to us, it's extremely important. But I tried writing it. It's good to find something where you know a little bit, but you don't know everything. Because then you write it as an insider and an outsider, if that makes sense. If I would have played hockey my whole life, I don't think I would have written that book, because I would have been too anxious about how will my friends in the hockey world view how I'm portraying this and this, and if that makes sense. I'm from a small town in the south of Sweden, but I wrote about a small town in the north of Sweden. So I know what it's like to live in a small town, but not in the north of Sweden. So that makes me an insider and an outsider, if that makes sense. And about the research, what I do is that whenever I need to know something, I find someone who seems to know a lot about that area or that subject. And I write them an email and I ask, can I ask you a lot of stupid questions? And that's always how I begin. I know you're probably very busy, but would it be possible for me to ask you a lot of stupid questions about your area of expertise? And a lot of the time people say no, or they don't want to answer your email, but sometimes someone, yeah, sure, why not? And then when I meet them or I talk to them on the phone, I always begin by saying, I don't know what I'm looking for. Because I don't. When I wrote Beartown, I had no idea what I was looking for. It was just that I talked to people who know a lot about this world that I want to write about. And I say, you know what, I'm just going to keep asking you really stupid questions. And all of a sudden you're going to say something and I'm going to go, there it is. Because I only know one thing, and that is to tell stories. But I'm pretty good at telling stories. I'm pretty good at knowing that's a story. That's the thing that I need. That's where the story begins. That's the little, a little turning point for me. And I just listen to people and ask you a question, and then all of a sudden they say something, and I go like, there it is. And that happens almost every time. If I talk to someone for long enough, they're going to say something, and I'm going to go, there it is. And I just have to trust myself that I will know when it happens. And I also have to be okay with, maybe we had a 3-hour conversation, and it was just one thing. It was one thing from a 3-hour conversation. Yeah, but that's enough. That's enough. And all the other stuff, that just made you understand the world. So that's how I go about doing research. And then from there, it's mostly, you're going to find, if you do a lot of research, that most of it is never going to make it into the book. But I have a strong belief that if I know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking. You know that. I don't know how to say this in another way, so excuse me for the very crude way of saying it, but I think people have a bullshit radar. I think when you read a book or you watch a movie, or you know if the person means it or not, you know if they know what they're talking about. If you listen to someone sing about having a broken heart, you know if they mean it. You can hear it. You can hear if they mean it. They can sing all the words, it's fine. You can have a perfect voice, but I'm not going to feel anything if it's not honest, if you don't mean it. So people are going to know. So if you do a lot of research and nothing of it gets into the book, no, but it's still, you know it, and that's going to come through. That's my belief. Sorry.
사실 변론이 딱히 있진 않습니다만 캐릭터 그리고 그 세계관 그리고 그 스토리라인 결말에까지 어느 정도 나오면 그 다음에 내가 모르는 부분이 무엇인가를 조사를 시작을 합니다. 저 스포츠는 제가 어렸을 때부터 워낙을 하긴 했는데요. 근데 이제 하키는 해본 적은 없습니다. 근데 스웨덴에서는 굉장히 인기 종목이고요. 제가 다 다 알지 않는, 하지만 어느 정도 아는 소재를 선택하는 이유는 insider이자 outsider라는 그런 그 특성을 꼭 살리기 위해서입니다. 그래서 제가 하키를 제가 어렸을 때부터 하지 않았기 때문에 일부러 선택을 했고, 저는 남스웨덴 출신이기 때문에 오히려 북스웨덴 쪽에 배경을 두었습니다. 그래서 보통 제가 어떻게 조사를 하는지 말씀을 드리자면, 그 분야의 전문가에게 바쁘시겠지만 멍청한 질문을 좀 몇 가지 해도 괜찮을까요? 라는 식으로 이메일을 쓰게 됩니다. 그리고 처음에 인터뷰를 시작을 할 때 제가 사실 무엇을 찾고자 하는지는 잘 모릅니다. 하지만 계속 이야기를 듣다 보면 이거는 살릴만해. 이 요소가 꼭 필요해. 터닝 포인트 등이 이제 잘 보이거든요. 그래서 제가 결국에는 이런 이야기들이나 보석들을 알아볼 만한 안목이 있다는 것을 신뢰하는 것뿐입니다. 물론 3시간의 인터뷰 중에서 한 개의 소재밖에 나오지 않아도 괜찮습니다. 왜냐하면 이 수많은 시간의 그 배경 지식은 결국에 솔직함으로 결국에 대변이 된다고 생각하거든요. 독자들은 bullshit radar, 그러니까 헛소리 감지기가 다 있다고 생각을 합니다. 제가 그 캐릭터를 정말로 솔직함을 갖고 쓴다면 사람들이 알아볼 거라고 생각합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 시간이 너무 빠르게 흘러갔는데요. 베크만 작가님께서는 이번이 첫 한국 방문이신데 연세대를 찾아주셔서 감사합니다. 그리고 오늘 이렇게 뜻깊은 시간을 만들어주신 참석하신 모든 분들께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 베크만 작가님께 큰 박수를 드리면서 이것으로 오늘 대담을 모두 마치겠습니다.
Thank you so much, Mr.
감사합니다.
Beckman.